Good afternoon. My name is Clark Freilick.
And I'm Clyde Gaw.
And this is the Blocks, Paper, Scissors podcast. In this podcast, Clyde and I will be discussing the unmotivated student. We're going to help identify that student and give you some ideas on how to reach that student in the TAB classroom. Well, Clyde, it's been a while since we've had a discussion, since we've had a chance to record our podcast. We met before Christmas.
Yep.
And a lot has happened since then. We had that amazing article that came out in the newspaper.
I was pleased. It's always fun to read what other people are thinking with respect to the work that you're doing. It's gratifying. Having said that, our work continues, and we are on the threshold of some, I think, educational breakthroughs. And that's kind of what motivates me, and I know it motivates you also.
Yeah, we all, it's weird because just thinking about what we do and seeing the kids is what helped motivate me to start this podcast and to help other teachers. And I know that's what we talked about in the article, was using this as a vehicle to help educate people who want to try TAB. It's kind of a unique way to share what we know, to share our knowledge. It's not very a non-linear way because we tend to get off topic every once in a while, but we do our best.
It's absolutely, you brought up a great point. It's not a non-linear way, and you think about the way schools are structured, and they are linear. And you and I have had private talks before, and we talk about creativity, how it's a non-linear pathway. You go 2 steps forward, 3 steps backwards sometimes, but that's not the way curricula is set up in traditionally the regular school setting. It's on a linear trajectory, and supposedly a child will reach mastery of content after they have gone through the curriculum strands of a particular subject area, of a particular class.
Yes.
And supposedly there will be intellectual growth.
Assuming that all children are equal and within a short, small range of heterogeneity, if that's a word.
It is.
Okay. Not all kids fit into that, and that's going to kind of feed our discussion today, because we're going to talk about the unmotivated child, or more specifically, the child that doesn't really react to normal stimulus.
Yeah, the regular classroom stimuli. Thinking about what we observe in with respect to populations of students in our class. We have a large percentage of children who are responsive. Thinking about Madeline Hunter's lesson sequence, where you might have an anticipatory response for a lesson activity, which would be like, in TAB speak, that would be our 5-minute lesson, where you get, the whole group introductory lesson for the day. If it's a teaching day or a lesson day. Mm-hmm. Sometimes if you have a studio day, the teacher's not going to talk that much. But let's say you did a whole group lesson, and you were thinking about Madeline Hunter and an anticipatory response to get children interested in an activity. Let's say, for example, I'm thinking about what I'm doing right now in the classroom, which is showing kids how to work with cardboard. Well, so I'm using slots and notches to build a structure, and I'm thinking all my kids are going to be juiced up to make slots and notches, and lo and behold, after I do my wonderful presentation, I have a handful of kids are still sitting unresponsive, and so my approach is to wait and to be patient with those children.
I know in recognizing an unmotivated student, there's a lot of different strategies to help motivate that child. The first one is that I know it has to do with relationships with a student and a teacher.
Uh-huh.
And we talk a lot about trust in my classroom, in that if the kids don't trust me, they're not going to react or have that desire to work for me.
Uh-huh.
That's why it's really important to have a relationship. And I know it's kind of hard in an art room because I have 800 and some students. And That's a lot of kids that I have to...
Only 800.
Only 800. Well, there's more, and they keep coming. But it's really important that at least the kid knows that we care. And I know a lot of kids don't think that their teachers care. There's little things that we can do as teachers to show them that we care. And in the TAB classroom, that's magnified because we do have those one-on-one conversations and talking with these kids and finding out what they like and giving them the time, and that we're not going to freak out if they don't do it by the end of the week.
Right.
Or at the end of the day.
We have a lot of evidence, anecdotal it may be, but I have a lot of children's essays and artist statements where they appreciate the patience that a teacher bestows upon them. And I know that your students would feel the same way about you, as you just mentioned. The child who opts to wait and see and watch the others and his other classmates, he may not be doing anything, or she may not be doing anything, but she's learning, or he's learning by watching and being in the room.
And incubating.
Yes, or incubating. And so having patience with those children is really important. I know the state and many districts, their desire to hurry children through, to hurry a child into the curriculum experience, I think sometimes is detrimental to the child, particularly if the child is experiencing any kind of emotional or cognitive dysfunction. And so giving the child space and time, I think, is really important. And the child recognizes that you recognize they need space and time. Now, whenever I have an administrator drop by, or if I know I'm being observed by an administrator, and I'll tell them before, post or pre-observation or post-observation, if you don't see a child working in my room, they're doing observations themselves, and they're having activity inside of their mind that we can't, that's invisible to us. And that is benefiting the child immensely, because we know later on there's going to be some creative activity happening. I was talking about, doing a large group presentation. Like I was working with cardboard the other day, and was doing my slot and notch routine and turning them into like Calder stabiles. So I had a handful of kids opted to work with cardboard. Then I had a bunch of others who went to the clay center and worked with the clay there, and then we had some others who went straight for the plaster blocks. We have like big pieces of plaster that they can carve into, and they can do some carving, because our focus this semester is 3D sculpture. So all my lessons and most of my center setup is related to 3D. But we still have the paint center and the drawing center set up. So after I did my presentation on cardboard, we had about 80% of the class was either doing cardboard or working with other centers materials. We have some kids, and because it's the first part of the semester, we've got a lot of new kids in there who've never been in a TAB classroom. And the first part of the semester, I think, is a shakedown period. The kids are getting a feel for what's going on, and I'm getting a sense of what the children are about. So it may seem like, they might be unmotivated at that particular point in time, but really they're just still dealing with uncertainty and thinking about the creative process, which I've already talked to them about. We talk about artists generate ideas. They can generate ideas on their own. In fact, that's all that artists do is they use their mental faculties. They use their imagination, their emotions, their powers of observation, powers to experiment, and their feelings and emotions to generate ideas. So we talk about that. Artists use their memories.
And it's really important that you talk about that, because another reason why a lot of kids might seem unmotivated is that their ideas, they're afraid, first of all, they need to know that they can do it and that they can be successful, and that their ideas, they may not feel that their ideas fit in with the classroom. So they might have some really great ideas, but it may not be in drawing, it may not be in painting or sculpture, but it might be in something else. And when given the choice, which is another thing to help kids motivate themselves, when you have more choice, you give them an opportunity to explore that wide area. This year I had a student who fit into that description of what we were talking about, not necessarily unmotivated, but he didn't want to do what we were doing or what was available. And until I talked to him, tried to tease out what he was interested in, and he was more interested in electronics, in kind of a technology bent. So we worked with a makey to help him make music, and he would turn artworks using a makey into instruments.
Now, you're going to have to upgrade my my technology baseline of knowledge of what a makey is.
So a makey is a small device that you plug in to your USB port, and then you connect varying wires to that, and then using your body as a ground, anytime you touch any of the other wires, it turns into, you can play a keyboard, you can play bongos. There's a lot of different things that you can do, and just allowing kids to use that as a way to express themselves was just a way to get this one student motivated to try some new things.
And what you're doing is you are transcending traditional boundaries of art education content. When you are stepping into that kind of a experience for the child, when you're differentiating an experience for the child to get them excited about class, the makey is not a traditional kind of art education experience, is it not? Or
no, it's more stimulated. As we talk about relationships and finding out what the kids are into, that experience could dovetail into making music or coding or using the makey or whatever the child's interest is in. Because the thing about TAB, it's not product based, it's process. And we want kids to be creative thinkers.
Right.
Now, if they're creative thinking with painting or with printmaking, that's one thing, but you can be a creative thinker with a lot of other things. We give them that opportunity to explore those areas.
And really, what if you think about it, what is taking place in a studio setting is an elevation of executive functioning skills of the child. So, we're asking them to operate as an agent of their own learning instead of being compliant to directions, specific directions on a single task that they might typically do in a regular classroom. Here, they're basically using their powers of imagination to invent an activity, a curriculum event, basically. And then acting upon those ideas. That's I think an elevation of the kinds of thinking that they're doing, which are task specific in a traditional classroom setting. For example, I'm thinking about my 7th grade science teacher who would tell us, okay, today we're going to read chapter 10 of your general science book on cellular mitosis. And I'm like, I can remember in 7th grade, I was like, I really want to draw
what does this mean
dinosaurs
to me?
And
why is this relevant? Why this doesn't mean anything to me?
Why?
But if he would have said, Clyde, I need a good illustration of cellular mitosis.
That might have worked for me at that time.
For you. And we have kids. You think about where the typical art room has gone in the last 10, 20 years, with the introduction of technology. I talk about makey. I know a lot of our teachers who have a lot of technology with little bits, electronic circuitry.
Uh-huh.
And, and they can make artwork that lights up, that makes noise. You've got all different types of things on the computer, animation, stop motion animation, kids making movies. I have another kid who's in this thing. He doesn't want to draw, but he wants to make music. So he's been making music using GarageBand.
Uh-huh.
So this is a song by one of my students who created this in art class.
I've got some students who are designing songs. They come into the room, and I was observing one, and he was unmotivated, like is our topic today. And I'm like, and I flat out asked him. I said, what are you interested in? And he says, well, I'm really into designing my own beats. I said, well, let's design. He sent me for his electronic portfolio. He had 10 complex compositions of individual songs he designed on a software product called Fruity Loops, and so I was blown away. I'm like, we don't have to do art if you're going to be engaged in doing this complex creative activity using Fruity Loops, designing your own beats. I'm all for that and then he did beautiful writing for me later on. The interesting thing is the artist statements of what children are reflecting upon with respect to the experiences that they've had a say in developing. And they're always grateful. And I have a lot of children who come to see us, in general education populations. We don't know what their situations are, Clark.
The kid that we were talking about earlier, that I know he was living with grandparents. Mom wasn't around for various reasons. Mom comes back in the picture, throws his whole system off.
Uh-huh.
It's just tragic.
Yeah.
What these kids have to deal with in a daily basis.
I'm thinking about one of my students. Her mother just passed away, and very deeply saddened. And she did not. I didn't force her to make art, and she didn't make art for about a month. And then out of the blue one day, she's sitting with her fellow students, who's kind of like he's kind of like what Nan Hathaway would call an outlaw. He's kind of like a rebel. Was
he wearing the red bandana?
No, but he drops the F-bomb every now and then.
I think I've seen him write on your tables a few times. They learned that in elementary school, by the way.
They learned it in your class?
Not in my class. They learned the F-bomb in elementary school because it's written all over our bathrooms for some reason. They learn a new word and they have to express themselves.
Yeah. Well, they're practicing their executive functioning skills again. It takes practice to really refine your executive functioning skills. So most of your life is spent practicing with the newly learned skills and newly acquired agency. Gosh, I wish I'd been exposed to more agency when I was younger in traditional school settings. I guess I turned out okay. But I know there are some children who did not.
For some strange reason, we don't know. It's like a crapshoot. Some do, some don't. But we want to try to make it so that the majority do. Who knows?
My main concern is to do no harm. And I know you and I, we've talked about this before. Our approach is, we focus on art content. We focus on student-centered pedagogy, and TAB has been a wonderful vehicle for us to provide children with creative experiences, but it also adds another dynamic in that the children can participate as much as they want to, or let off on the gas pedal when they feel like they need to also. So this business about hurrying children through a curriculum, there's a lot of evidence that schools hurry children through. And particularly with these new testing mandates, especially here in the state of Indiana, where they're cranking up new tests all the time, basically running test prep in the school. When children get to art class, this is a whole different kind of a learning dynamic, learning environment, one that's infused with aesthetics, and the curriculum dynamic of TAB is that there's democratic processes involved in the curriculum decisions that are made. So that's different from what goes on in a traditional classroom. Even though we have many wonderful, wonderful teachers who are working with children and doing amazing things throughout K-12 ed, but I think many teachers are hamstrung by legislative mandates that trickle down from the state house to the schoolhouse. Unlike art education, which we don't have those testing mandates, that frees us up to develop curriculum that is what I know for a fact, having seen it firsthand and read student responses. I know firsthand the art curriculum that we are deploying right now is extremely beneficial from a social, emotional standpoint.
It's not technically a curriculum like people would think, but we do present an amount of information and then let the kids work with it. And which is kind of, if you think about it, would be really confusing to a lot of kids to come to a school that's always been in a typical standard type school, and then come into a situation where they do have freedom to, where the freedom is, the responsibility is on them to help learn. So, there's that cognitive dissonance that kids have to deal with when they're when they're exposed to TAB. So that might take a long time to figure out. And now you see a lot of classroom teachers kind of borrowing from the idea of student-led. How can we get more choice into the classroom?
Yes.
Borrowing from Maker Movement, borrowing from wherever, as long as they're giving the kids more choice, empowering the kids with their own ideas, then there's light at the end of the tunnel. Now if we could just get rid of all the tests and grades.
We should, you think about it, what we should be doing is portfolios. If you had working portfolios and you had presentation portfolios that were community-based, school-based, that followed the child around, the school district and the communities can look at the intellectual growth that's taking place. And if you went to assessment-based, if you went to portfolio assessments instead of test-based assessments, it's going to be all about the child. It's going to be all about the child, and that's going to create a feedback loop that's extremely beneficial. The experience is not going to be mechanized, but it's going to be organic, and the children are going to have much more many more meaningful experiences, as opposed to doing work that they're just being tasked to do.
And think about how that relates to motivation.
Yes.
When the student is empowered with his own ideas and understands that he can be successful or she can be successful in their own ideas, and coming up with that idea and working through that process of taking chances, failing, learning along the way, and then presenting that as, here's what I learned, as opposed to take this test. Motivation is going to be increased immensely.
Self-expression is something that cannot be overlooked, but it is overlooked by legislators and policymakers who are ramming experiences down children's throats. And these experiences, by the way, are behavior, they're basically behavior modification experiences and structured around not just Pavlov, but Skinnerian operant conditioning principles with rewards and punishments. And but back to what we do, and that's providing avenues of self-expression. And I was talking about evidence. I want to read to you. This is from a former student. He was a tough kid. This was a tough kid, and he was a major athlete, but he was dealt some pretty difficult blows, I think, in his childhood. And I'm not going to get into specifics, but here he writes to me. He says, the first thing I want to talk to you about is how I value how I can express myself. In this art class, I can show you how much. In this class, I get to show my love in my way of art. The second thing I want to talk to you about is how I can do what I want to do. Knowing that I can do what I want takes the pressure off of me because I don't have to make it perfect. It makes me very happy to have that choice, and it makes me feel grown. The last thing I would like to express to you is how I can just have fun with what I can do in art class. I have no certain thing that I have to do. I can just come in and do what I do. So that is much more fun than having to do the same thing everyone else is doing. This child had some difficulties with communication, and I would say he was not a natural writer or a natural speaker, but art class was of immense value to him. He did graduate. He was a star athlete. He led his team to a state championship in football.
Go Dragons.
And he was a tough football player. If you can imagine somebody who's 6 feet tall, 250 pounds of pure muscle, that's what this student was. Having said that, he grew up in difficult conditions. I don't want to get too specific about it, but the value of him being able to take our tab class, and he took it with me in third grade, and he took it with me as a junior and senior in high school, and it was very important to him, and to be in that class and to have opportunity for self-expression. And his interest in art was in drawing football logos, and so he would draw freehand from memory. He would draw and do variations on a theme of the football logo teams that he was interested in. So that was his variation on a theme for his art pathway, was working with football logos and then abstracting them and reconfiguring elements from the logos. And we had conversations about how he might be able to do that. And then he did some collaborative work with some classmates that were of very important to him also. But I just want to say that, here in the state of Indiana, where our state leads the nation in children who think about suicide, our state of Indiana leads the nation in children who consider ending their lives. They have thoughts about that. And this has been going on for some time. We also have a high rate of juvenile suicide. And that statistic alone makes me think that school has something to do with this. That's a common denominator that all of our teenagers have is, they're in school. And what's going on in school that they don't feel connected to? School should be a place of joy, a place of immense satisfaction where learning becomes, in and of its own, learning becomes an end in and of itself. I don't think I think we need to do some major introspection about school, not just school reform, and how to raise test scores, but what is happening to children as they go through K-12 ed.
It would be interesting is correlate high-stakes testing with the rise in adolescent suicide or thoughts. A lot of people blame bullying.
Yes. My question about bullying is, if schools are wonderful places to be in, a bully wouldn't be interested in bullying. A bully would be interested in learning. And back to learning being a flow state. Learning should be a spiritual matter.
It should be fun.
The curriculum
School should be fun. Where's the joy in education?
Right.
Why aren't kids waking up? I mean, I love my job. I wake up, I want to come to school. I want to teach.
Right.
Why aren't kids waking up thinking, oh, I can't wait to get into class? They wake up if they're sick and they're like, I got to go to school because it's UA day.
Right.
And I don't want to miss art or I don't want to miss music. I've known kids to do that. And their parents are like, no, you have a 102 fever. You can't go to school.
Yeah. Was it Nan Hathaway tells a great story about, she said one of her students said, well, I was really sick this morning and I wasn't going to go to school, but then I remembered I had art with Miss Hathaway today, so I came into school.
And infected everybody. I think it was one of those students that shared their flu with me.
Well, yeah.
Flu and pneumonia.
Right.
So.
Right. Back to the whole thing about learning, and if learning is a joyful activity, if it's a joyful experience, you wouldn't want to bully somebody. You'd be interested in your learning. But that's not the case, because
so then again affects motivation. If there's joy in the school, you're motivated.
You're not going to worry about bullying anybody. You're going to be interested in what you're learning, because learning is a natural natural aspect of being a human being is learning.
And there's no way that we can solve this educational problem with our podcast. But
No, but we certainly can provide tab teachers and other art teachers with the knowledge that the art room can be that special place in school where joyful learning is a regular occurrence.
And they need to promote that. That is probably one of the things that I tell my administrators all the time. A lot of the time, though, they're like, well, you need to do this assessment or you need to do that. And I'm like, why? They're learning. Why do I have to produce this piece of paper? Why does this one piece of paper indicate that they're all learning? You can just look in my classroom when they're working and see that they're learning.
You can see 30 kids in a classroom. If you come
37.
37. It was what you're averaging. You're averaging 37 or 35. That's...
Hashtag 800.
And we're laughing about this because, that's just what we do. We're used to big class sizes, know, and it's... I guess we could call it job security, but...
I don't know what it is.
Everybody wants to come to art class.
But there again, thanks to Tab, you can set up your art room in a way that minimizes the pressure on you as a teacher.
Right. Because in a tab classroom, you're unlocking the natural capacities of children for learning.
Yeah.
And so, and in all of its various forms, whether it be hands-on, whether it be more focused on other areas of, thinking about learning through doing research, thinking about learning through experimentation, thinking about learning through conversation, thinking about learning in groups, all manner of learning taking place in a tab classroom. When tab is running on, when it's firing on all
12 cylinders.
12 cylinders, and not like your 4-cylinder Vega, but this is
without a floor. But that's, and that goes back to motivation. When kids realize they have that opportunity, they're more apt to be motivated to create things like that. So we're going to have unmotivated students.
Yeah.
And we're going to do everything that we can within our classroom to help find what motivates them. And it could be untraditional means. It could be setting up a relationship with that student and just focusing on that student and helping them. Because in this tab classroom, we have the majority of the kids who are functioning at their own level, making their own meaningful artwork.
Yes.
But then you have this one student who hasn't got to that place yet. And so we now have the time to spend time with that student to help him or her find what motivates them or find what their passions are.
I know Yante Jackson and Augustin, they did a presentation in Boston last year at the Tab Institute on working with challenging classrooms, and they talked also about the importance of maintaining a tab structure, but also introducing new materials or interesting materials that would capture children's imagination. And that's one thing tab teachers are able to do is use new materials in novel ways and introduce
old materials.
Old materials in novel ways.
You are the cardboard king. But cardboard's one
I
of
stole
those.
from you.
But cardboard's one of those things that it's just such an incredible material to work with, and a lot of artists now are using cardboard to create their artwork.
Yeah. I just draw on straight on sheets of cardboard anymore.
And it's cheap. It's all over the place.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amazon.
You can do all kind of stuff.
Amazon's
with it.
got good cardboard.
I'll just raid a dumpster if I see some cardboard sticking out of it. I like the big sheets, but sometimes those are not available. So you can always glue bits together with Elmer's glue or combination Elmer's glue, hot glue. Cardboard.
Gummed tape works really well.
Or gum tape. That's right, gum tape.
Yeah.
I mean, cardboard's a wonderful, wonderful sculptural material. I saw this one rebel artist one time. He did a portrait of one of our presidents using cardboard. It was like unbelievable.
That's the one where the marble came out the nose. Should we put that on the page?
No, we can't put that. But no, I saw
Picasso?
and Picasso was using cardboard in the early 19th century when he was doing collage. He called it synthetic collage, and he was using cardboard materials. Cardboard's great.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. It's a material that help. If you're in elementary school, that's all my kids want to do. Cardboard. They just want to build. And cardboard's one of those things that helps motivate them. Other people like, painting. That motivates them. Or wire.
Yeah, wire's
popsicle
great.
sticks. Some kids like challenges. You can challenge kids. I think I'm going to do a 100 craft stick challenge.
Yes.
I'm just going to count out 100 craft sticks, write up a challenge. What can you do with it? Put some loose parameters and see what the kids can come up with.
Another way that we deal with unmotivated kids is with the art trap. concept.
The art traps. Yeah.
And those work really well. We just drop them off and move on to interact with other kids, and that sometimes helps. Being patient. I was talking earlier about a young lady who had lost her mother. I left her alone and just kind of interacted with her a little bit, and we were providing the one child who was sitting next to her was a rebel kind of a guy, and she was just observing him for about a month after her mother passed away, and I was giving him clay because he wanted to work hands-on, and the attempts I'd had with trying to give her art traps weren't working. So one day she wanted to paint, and she asked me for painting materials. So I set painting materials down in front of her, and lo and behold, she produces the most beautiful expressionistic painting of it was like a landscape. It kind of reminded me of a Gregory Amanoff. Gregory Amanoff, he's a painting professor at Columbia University. He does like these abstract naturalistic landscapes, and then that's what she was painting. So I brought it up to her. I said, you're channeling Gregory Amanoff. Well, who's Gregory Amanoff? Well, here he is, and I pull him up on my iPhone and showed her, and we produced some more abstract landscape paintings, and she was very appreciative, and that's the kind of cathartic experience that TAB provides with all kinds of children, and in particular with children who might seem to be unmotivated. But I would say the fascinating thing about TAB is that we can provide children with patience. We can cross curricular boundaries. We're not fragmented into just teacher designed projects, but we can cross over traditional boundaries of curriculum. And I think the fact that there is other learning stimuli in the room with, we observe swarm creativity, children having conversations with each other. Having a conversation is a creative act in and of itself. I mean, here you and we're having like running conversation, and we're generating thought and words in split seconds. I think that's, kind of a unique creative event, and you're able to broadcast it then later on to our listeners.
Our lovely audience. Thank you for listening.
Do we have how many listen? Do we have more than?
I don't know.
A handful, I hope.
I've been getting some comments.
That's good.
Yeah, good comments. A lot of people are starting to follow the podcast. People are downloading it, so I know it's over 800 from Podbean. So
that's great. That's great.
As we get back in the swing of things and start focusing on some other things, we'll mind the TAB teachers page.
TAB
educators page.
We'll have to thank Candy Pole Price for making that change. Candy and Lisa Van
Thanks for confusing me.
Julie Toole.
They work so hard on that thing.
Yeah, we can't thank them enough, for all the work they've done on that, and it's like it has a life of its own.
Some awesome stuff on there.
But back to all the learning that goes on in a TAB classroom. Eventually everything kicks in. That's the beautiful thing is all the divergent forms of learning experience going on and in a TAB classroom, and all the wonderful opportunities to take ownership of your learning and to do collaborations and to take initiative and to become your own agent. It's very authentic in the TAB classroom, very real experiences happening in there. They're not manufactured. They can be manufactured if the teacher so desires to provide more structured activities, but also many organic opportunities for art or art events or art activities to be developed.
Yeah, I prefer the organic.
Did you want to get into a wheelhouse and we just kind of like chain smokers? We just keep smoking.
We have a TAB event coming up Saturday, March 3rd.
Kristen Odell.
Kristen Odell in Middlebury.
In Middlebury at Northridge High School.
Northridge High School.
If you go to tab educators page, Kristen has posted that on the events on the events tab.
Clyde will be there. I'll be there.
We don't know who else will be there.
We don't know who else. Anybody else wants to join?
Oh, there's people from, I think, there's some folks from Iowa who are coming.
Oh.
And I think there might be people spending the night
Cool.
in Elkhart, because that's where the big city that Middlebury's next to is Elkhart.
Maybe we'll get some people from Michigan.
I hope so. Maybe Chicagoland.
Maybe northern Indiana. I don't know. Central Indiana. There's a lot of us around. We need to get together and start networking, and I'm looking forward to it.
Maybe Brett Bailey might make an appearance.
I don't know.
Maybe Marvin Bartell might show up.
Oh, yeah, Marvin. I forgot about him.
That'd be nice. That'd be neat to see Marvin. We haven't seen Marvin in a long time.
No. So, if you don't have anything to do March 3rd, head on up to Middlebury, Indiana. Check it out on the tab Educators webpage events. Indicate that you're interested or going. We'd like to see you there. Kristen would like to see you there.
Sounds like a good time.
Yep. Good times. Yeah, good times. So, let's wrap this sucker up. Episode 10. That's crazy.
That's 10 tab blocks, paper, scissors podcasts.
In the can.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of talking.
But we still have a lot more on our minds.
At least 10 more.
We really didn't talk that much about rebels, outlaws, and rogues. And we've not really talked about the Secret Art of Boys. So, and we're supposed to get another special guest interview from a VIP. So I liked our talk with Diane.
It was one of the most popular podcasts.
We should have Diane back on again. She could tell us about, her experiences with, at Mass Art, talking about what's going on currently, and she knows like people from visual thinking strategies, folks. She could tell stories about that. Tell us stories about
Abigail Housen.
Yeah. And Philip Yenawine.
Yep.
I mean, that's good to know that if you're a tab teacher. I mean, you can use that to, if you can use visual thinking strategies to talk about other children's tab artwork.
Right.
I think that would be, that's a really neat thing to do when you do that.
We'll have to talk about that in another podcast.
Yes, we will.
Clyde, do you have anything you want to add?
We're looking forward to our next podcast, Clark, and maybe we'll get some questions from our audience, and we can talk about them.
Hopefully. Thank you for listening to this episode of Blocks, Paper, Scissors podcast. You can now stream it to all your devices using Podbean or iTunes. And you can also leave a comment if you so desire. See you next time, everyone.
Goodbye.
Chip, I'm gonna come at you like a spider monkey.
Like a spider monkey! Go on!